Hello. We're just gonna wait a few more. Go ahead and get started. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Constanza, and today we're going to discuss Unity forms and image forms. They can be great for collecting information from users that would normally be collected using paper forms, reducing both the processing time and the paper waste. For this webinar, we're going to talk about what exactly Unity forms and image forms are, some of the differences between them and their uses, some of the functionality of both forms, and then we'll go into a demo of the basics of how to configure them. First, we're going to go over what Unity and image forms are and the benefits of them over paper forms and e-forms. So for the old processes, using paper forms, processing is very lengthy. Each form would need to be scanned individually and brought into OnBase. They would then need to be manually indexed in the system. This whole process is time-consuming and inefficient. There are other issues that paper forms have, such as if the handwriting is not readable or if the form gets lost. An alternative to paper forms are e-forms. These are electronic forms created using HTML. The user can type into the fields, which can be configured to automatically index the form. Although e-forms do not have the disadvantages of paper forms, there are downsides. E-forms require knowledge of HTML to build and CSS to style. This will require more skill and training than paper forms. It can be time-consuming to build the form using HTML, style it using CSS, and then configure it for use within OnBase. Unity and image forms simplify the process. Like e-forms, the forms are digital. There's no need to manually scan or index the form. When the form is submitted, it's automatically brought into OnBase and is indexed using the information found on the form. Although Unity and image forms are very similar to e-forms, they don't have the same disadvantages. Unity and image forms are easily customizable without any coding experience necessary. The forms designer uses a simple drag and drop method for configuration, making it easy to design forms that look good and function well. Next, we're going to go over the basics of Unity forms. Unity forms are digital forms that are designed and configured in OnBase. They are easy to customize and design with a drag and drop interface. You have the ability to add custom actions, to add functionality that would normally require programming knowledge. They can also be filled out within OnBase and outside of it on an external website, allowing the form to be filled out by users that are not in OnBase. Either way, the document will be brought into OnBase and indexed according to the fields on the form. Next, I'll show you an example of a Unity form. So you can see we're in the Unity client. Users can fill out forms by clicking the Forms button and the Home ribbon. See the available forms on the left side of the screen here. I'm going to open a Unity form. So this is a Unity form created to gather information about a supply request. There's a couple different features of this form that I'd like to highlight. Some of the fields are required as shown by the red star. If you do try to submit the form without filling out those fields, it will give you an error message, letting you know which fields need to be filled out. You can use different types of data for fields. For example, the requested date field is a date data type. When your user clicks on it, that field clicks on it, a date picker will appear, allowing user to easily select the month, year, and day of the date. When the required items section of this form uses Unity Form's repeating section feature, which is perfect for situations like this one, where there's a section where the user could input multiple options, or they could input only one. To add another item, we can just click the Add button. We can add as many as we want. You can also remove as many rows as you want, just as easily by clicking the Remove button. Within this repeated section, we also have a field that is automatically calculated. In this example, the total cost field is calculated by the quantity times the price per item. This is handy to avoid any possible mistakes that could be made when calculating by hand, and it also speeds up the processing time. As you can see, it calculated the total cost, and I was also set up a grand total field to calculate the total of the total cost fields. You can see the grand total changes depending on what is inputted for the individual items. I'll just fill out the rest of the required fields here so we can submit the form. When the form is submitted, the user can see that it's submitted, and it will ask them if they want to submit another form of the same type. We'll click No. So after the Unity form is saved, it is stored as a document within document retrieval. Unity forms are configured with a document type group and a document type like all documents in OnBase. In this example, it is set up as an HR supply request. So we'll set it to search for today. As you can see, here's the form that we just submitted. And if we look at the keywords, the fields that corresponded to the keywords have been filled out and automatically indexed. So next we'll talk about image forms. Image forms are very similar to Unity forms in the way they work and are configured. They are both configured using the same forms designer within OnBase, and they are also imported and indexed after being submitted, just like Unity forms. The main difference is that image forms are use an image of an existing form to build a template. Basically, you can put fields on top of an already existing form, allowing the user to have the same look and feel of the original form, while having the advantages of a Unity form. Image forms are a great way to digitize forms that need to have the exact form and layout as their paper counterparts, such as regulated government forms. Now we'll go over a demo of an image form. So like Unity forms, they can be filled out in the Forms tab. And I already have a test image form created. As you can see, the form is an image with fields placed on top for the user to type in information. The date field is configured to automatically fill in today's date. It is also set to read only, so the user can't put in any date they want. It's just set to that date. If we try to submit the form without filling out anything, it'll let us know that there's required fields. Type it in. And then we also have it so that one checkbox must be clicked before we can submit the form. I used custom actions to also make it so that you can only click one field at a time, making it so the user can't check multiple fields when we only want them to check one. Now we can submit the form. Same as Unity Forms, this will be stored as a document within OnBase. And we can search by the document type that we set up for this image form. And we can open the form. As you can see, the data we inputted is saved. And if we look at keywords, the corresponding fields saved as keywords, similar to Unity Forms. As you can see, image forms are very similar to Unity Forms, but instead of building a template, it uses an image of an existing form as the layout. So we'll go over some of the functionality that is shared between the two forms. Custom actions are very useful when building Unity forms. They allow for more complicated logic within the Unity and image forms without the need for coding knowledge. Custom actions are truly customizable, having a wide range of uses. They can be used to reduce human error and simplify the form for the user. For example, if a field needs to be calculated, a custom action can be set up to calculate that field, avoiding any error the user may make. Custom actions can also be configured to help simplify the layout of the form for the user filling it out. If there's a section of the form that needs to be filled out later by a different user, like a manager, you can make it so the original user doesn't even have to see that section by hiding it for any user as not part of a specific user group, eliminating the chance that they fill out the wrong section and making sure the user is only able to see the sections they need to see. Some of our examples of the capability of custom actions are making fields read-only, setting the value of a field, and making a field required for the form to be submitted. Custom actions can be as complex or as simple as you like. You can add multiple conditions and actions onto one custom action, allowing you to truly customize your form to function the way you want. We'll go into a bit more into custom actions when we demo the configuration of a form. Unity and image forms both leverage the many features and functionality of OnBase. They can be easily configured to automatically store different fields on the form as keywords for the document, eliminating the need for forms to be manually indexed. Like other documents in OnBase, Unity and image forms can be used with workflow and can be set to be brought into a lifecycle right when they're indexed. Unity and image forms can also be shared outside of OnBase. This allows users to fill out the forms and submit the forms to OnBase from an external website. Unity and image forms can utilize both new and existing data sets within OnBase. This can help reduce errors when filling out the form, since the user will only be able to choose from the options available. Autofill keyword sets can also be used to Unity and image forms, making the form easier to fill out and reducing the chance of mismatched information. Unity and image forms leverage user groups within OnBase, so only the users that need to see and fill out the form can do so. There are other features with OnBase and Unity and image forms. Unity and image forms can use as well, but these are just some that I wanted to highlight. Now I'll give a demo of how to configure both types of forms. First, we'll configure a Unity form. We can configure both Unity and image forms in the Unity client's form designer. This is where we can create and edit forms. We're going to create a new form, so we'll hit create. Here we can choose if it's a Unity or image form. Since we're doing the Unity form first, we'll just leave it how it is. We also have the option of choosing if we want the form to be a document, an agenda item, or a workflow item. For this demo, we'll just leave it as a document. For the document type, I specifically configured a document type for the form. So we'll go with that one. And we'll give template a name. Unity forms can have a couple different themes you can select. Themes are basically the color scheme of the form. If you don't like any of the pre-configured themes, you can always create a new one. This demo will just use one of the pre-configured themes. And we'll click OK. As you can see, this is the default setup for the form. We're given the title of a form template on top, a blank section, and a submit button. We'll have to add the various fields and sections we want to use using the toolbox on the left. There are three main categories for the toolbox. Controls, which are the various fields, formatting tools, buttons, etc. that make up the form. Then we have keywords. These are the actual keywords of the document type. Anything the user enters in these fields will be saved as that keyword on the document. These fields are also automatically configured to make sure the value entered is valid for that keyword, such as if it's a date keyword, you won't be able to enter in like an alphanumeric value. And then there's properties. Properties are various properties of the document, such as when it was created, date stored, document handle, stuff like that. So for this demo, we're just going to configure a simple Unity form with a custom action. So first we're going to add a panel. Panels are useful for formatting the form and getting sections where you want them to be. So we'll drag it over here. Panel is just one column right now, but we want to split up the form, this form section, into two different columns. So we'll come over here and select the little pencil icon next to the columns. And then we're just going to change it to 2 columns. And then we just need to change the column widths to be less than or equal to 100. And we'll click OK. Now we can add a couple fields to the forms. A couple keyword fields. Just dragging and dropping the forms. We can also just click on one of the keywords and then click over where we want it to be. These fields will be saved as keywords when the form is submitted. If we wanted to add a field that's not going to be stored as a keyword, we have a couple different options within the controls section of the toolbox. If we wanted to add a field where the user could input a date, we can just add a normal text box. There's a couple different things we can change on the field. For this text box, we don't want it to be called untitled text box. So we'll give it a name that users will know what information they need to input. Now, we only want users to be able to input dates into the field. So we can change the data type from text to date. There's a couple different options there, including numeric and currency. Those would restrict the types of values that the user could input to those specific data types. But we're going with date for this one. If we want to make this field required, we just need to check the required box within the field's properties. As you can see, it added a red asterisk next to the form, so then users can know that this field is required. We can also use custom actions to hide certain sections of the form. Let's say we wanted to add a section that only the manager will need to see and fill out. We can create that section and then easily hide it if the user is not in specific user groups. First, we'll add the section and the fields that we want within it. So as you can see, I'm just going to drag and drop. We can also add a multi-line text box. I changed it to ID section, not the label section. That's okay because we're going to change it later anyways. Since an ID basically lets us know when we're configuring custom actions, which control or keyword field we're actually changing. Okay. And then we'll change the label on this one as well. Once we got that section, and as I was saying a minute ago, we changed the ID so we know what's the ID of this section for when we configure the custom actions. So custom actions are configured by clicking this little custom action button right here, and then we can click new. If we had any existing custom actions, they would show up right here. So configure this custom action. First, we'll give it a name. To basically just a simple way of saying what it's doing. Next, we'll add a condition. There's a couple different conditions here, but for this one, we're going to do user is in or not in group. Custom action, we basically want to hide the section if the user is not in the manager group. So we'll change the user group to manager and change in to not in. So this action will only happen when the user is not in the user group of manager. Next, we'll add the actions. Next, we'll choose change element visibility. This will allow us to hide the element. So then we'll change the element, and here's where the ID came in. For the majority of controls and fields on the form, they kind of give a very generic name, which is why we just changed the ID of the manager section so we know exactly which one we're looking for. And since it says hidden, we won't have to change it. We could also make it visible if we wanted to, but since we're trying to hide it, we're just going to leave it as hidden. Okay, we'll click OK. So we're done configuring the custom action for this form. Before a form is published for use, you want to use the test drive feature to test the form. This basically allows us to test the form without having to worry about it messing with our production system, submitting forms that are just tests. Since we're just viewing this form as a regular user, we do not see the manager section since we created the custom action. If we try to submit the form while filling out the required fields, we'll get an error letting us know that this field is required. If we click in the date of time off field, we can see it brought up the date picker that we are wanting it to bring up. since we set it to a date type. We can also type in the field if we want, but if we type in a non-valid value, it will give us an error. Now, if we submit the form, we can see that it submitted the form data and lets us know basically the ID of the fields that were filled out and what was the value that was stored for that field. When a form is submitted in Test Drive, it is not saved in OnBase. This allows you to test the forms as many times as you want without having to worry about test documents being in the system. As we can see over here, we have a couple options for previewing. We can see if we can make the form new or not new. So if there's any actions that rely on that, we can see how that works with the test drive. Since we have that one section that only the manager group will see, we want to make sure that that works properly. So we'll click the manager user group to have it be viewed as someone in the manager user group. As you can see, the manager section shows up now because we're viewing it as a user in the manager group. If we change it to a different user group and refresh it, it goes away again. Since we were test driving the form and it's working as expected, we can publish it. If you ever were working on a form and you need to not publish it right away, you can always save it as a draft as well, but we're going to publish it since this is how we want it. Once we publish the form, it'll basically be pushed out to all of our users. If we're editing an existing form, it would just push out the new changes. It's always good to add a comment when you publish the form, just so you know what changes were made in that particular revision. But since this is just a demo, we'll just leave it blank. Now, if we go back to the Forms tab, we can see the form we just created. And since we're logged in as a user that is part of the Manager user group, we can see the Manager section of the form. Next, we'll configure an image form. So we'll go back to the Forms Designer and click Create. With image forms, we have a bit less options. A similar thing, we're gonna set it to a document type that we have configured for the image form. And we're gonna give it a name. As you can see, we don't have the template already kind of set up as the Unity form was. This time we just have a blank screen. This is because we haven't added the image yet. So we'll go over here to the Properties pane and we'll change the background image attribute. The images for image forms are stored as a document in the system bitmaps document type. We can also import the image from this screen, but I've already have the image imported, so we'll just select it. Click Select. Now we can add the fields by clicking on them and then dragging them into place. Using the simple drag and drop interface. We can also change the size of the field so it is the same size as the field on the form. Like Unity Forms, we have a couple different options for the field's properties. For example, we can make this required. In image forms, there are no red asterisks letting the user know is required, but they will still get an error message if they try to submit the form while it is empty. So we'll add a couple more fields here. Okay. And then we'll also add 2 checkboxes. We can use custom actions to make it so the user is unable to check more than one checkbox at a time. So we'll do that by going to custom actions and creating a new one. First, we'll want to create 2 custom actions for this. One that if the first checkbox checked, then the other one will be unchecked, and then a second one to basically do the reverse. If the second checkbox is checked, uncheck the first one. So we'll give it a name so we know exactly what the custom action does. Next, we'll add a condition. So for this one, we'll want to check if the field is empty or not empty. We'll click OK. We'll change the field for this custom action to the first checkbox, and then change empty to not empty. So if the user checks the checkbox, it will no longer make it empty. And then add an action to clear the field value of the second checkbox. Okay. And then we'll basically do the same thing. So if the second field is not empty, it'll clear the first one. Okay. Next, lastly, we have to add a submit button to the form since we do not already get one automatically. So we'll add a little submit button on the bottom here, which you can make it as big. You can change the dimensions of the submit button. To be how you want. Okay. So now we'll test drive the form again using test drive. As you can see here, we can fill out various fields. Also with the checkboxes, as you can see, if you check one, the other one gets automatically unchecked. And it looks like since we were doing the test drive, which this is why test drive is a thing, it looks like the last name field was accidentally set to read only. So we'll go out of test drive and then go to the last name text box. And as you can see, the read only field is checked. We'll uncheck that so then the user can enter in values for that field. If we try to submit the form without putting any values in for the last name field, it'll let us know because we put that field as required. We can put a value in there, add a little checkbox, you can submit. Similar to test drive, it'll let us know what data was inputted for all the fields. Since it's working how we want, we'll publish the form. So now it is available to any users. If we go to the form, we can see the form that we just created. In conclusion, Unity and image forms are a great way to create new digital forms or digitize existing ones. We covered the benefits of Unity forms and image forms over other types of forms, such as paper or e-forms. They work with many OnBase features to make filling out, indexing, and storing forms fast and easy. We also went over the difference between Unity and image forms. Unity forms allow you to create a new form template from scratch with an OnBase, while the image forms allows you to digitize existing forms, giving it a similar functionality as a Unity form while keeping the same format. Custom actions can be configured in both form types, allowing for the kind of functionality that you would usually require knowledge of coding. We then covered the basics of configuring Unity and image forms using the Forms Designer within the Unity client. Does anyone have any questions? I'll give everyone a minute to type the questions in the chat. Okay, I'll see a couple questions in the chat. What version of OnBase are image forms available? I don't know the exact version that they were introduced, so I'll have to get back to you. I know pretty much Foundation always has image forms, but I'm not sure exactly what version of OnBase they were first introduced. How can a non-OnBase user access a form, fill it out, e-sign it, and submit? You can use FormPop to either have a link that they can go to, or you can embed it within an external website. There's a couple different ways to do it. There is a signature control field that you can put on the Unity form to e-sign it. But if it is on an external website or in a link, it will come in directly into OnBase. How does licensing work for web-based forms being accessed by non-OnBase users? I will also have to look into that. So I don't know what the licensing is off the top of my head. In the interest of time, I'm going to reach out via email to answer these questions just because there's a lot of them coming in. I'm going to go to the next slide. Thank you everyone for attending today. And I'll reach out to answer those questions that were asked. Have a nice day. Thank you.